We're just actually waiting. We are expecting a few more people to join us, but obviously sometimes kind of people come in a few minutes late. So what we might just do whilst we're waiting for people to join us is just take a few minutes to practice some relaxed breathing whilst we're waiting. So why don't we all do this together? We'll just take a moment to kind of take a few deep breaths in through our nose and exhale. So inhaling calm, cool air and exhaling hot, stressed air. I'll just turn off the webcam for a second whilst we're waiting for the others to join us, and keep practicing your breathing, and we'll be back in a moment. Hi, well, we're just waiting for a few people to join us, so we were just taking a quick pause then, but you guys are here. Why don't we get started? I'm just gonna do a quick couple of introductions. So this session tonight is about managing stress, panic and anxiety. And I don't know if you know this, but actually April has been Stress Awareness Month. And I also don't know how many of you were kind of in the exam season at the moment and feeling quite stressed because of that. But we thought that it would be really good to kind of come together and just talk a little bit about kind of stress and anxiety, so that hopefully you guys can kind of have some tips to take away and help you cope better over the coming months. I'm hoping that together we can kind of create quite a nice kind of calm, chilled out space. Obviously I want you guys all to kind of feel like you can chat. There's the chat section which I'll introduce, but I'm really hoping that we can have a nice kind of break from whatever it is going on in your life for the next hour. I need to introduce myself. So my name's Ali. I'm a counsellor at Off the Record. I'm also kind of, I also manage Off the Record's online services, which means that I do quite a lot of these Starcasts. And I'm working tonight with another young person called Shana. And Shana's going to be helping to facilitate the chat. So if you've got any questions, then feel free to ask them as we're going along, and Shana will get back to you and help you with anything you need. So that's who we are. I'm going to give you a quick tour of the Starcast in case you haven't been before. So obviously, hopefully, you can see me waving. I'm in the top left-hand side of your screen. Then underneath that, you've got a list of who else is here. So you can see myself and Shana, and then the rest of you guys. On the right-hand side, you've got the chat section, which I've mentioned. This is a chance for you to kind of use that space to have some discussions. It's also a place where you can ask questions, and Shana might post some links which might be helpful as we're going through tonight. What I would say is that please don't feel pressured to write or say anything if you don't want to. There's no pressure at all. Then I just want to point out, hopefully somewhere above me, there should be an I need help now button. So I just want to let you know that if at any point whilst we're talking tonight you begin to feel quite stressed and quite anxious, by all means do press that button, and one of us will get back to you at the end of the session with a bit of information about where else you can go to for some kind of immediate support. Okay, so that's the kind of what you can see. So managing anxiety, what's the point of tonight's session? So what I'm hoping we'll do in the next 50 minutes or so is let's explore the feelings of stress, panic and anxiety. I want to look at the impact of anxiety and understand how it affects us physically as well as psychologically and emotionally. And then what I'm hoping is we can share some tips about how to cope with anxiety, maybe share some practical things that we've found helpful. And then I just need to go through, before we kind of get into that, I just have a few guidelines to go through as a group. So we go through these every session, and it's just to let you know that in order to get the best out of the session, we think it's a good idea to try and stay for the whole thing and be present. I think particularly with tonight's session, this is about stress and anxiety. And so it's actually about, let's make this space speak. Sorry, I just cut out then. Can everyone hear and see me okay? Yeah, okay. So I think that just maybe the connection will trip out. Hopefully we won't have that happen again. Okay, good. So I was just reading through kind of some of our guidelines. So everything we talk about tonight is confidential. Let's not discuss it with anyone outside of the session. This is about creating a supportive space where everyone can let their feelings out. Let's treat each other with respect, take each other's views seriously. Sometimes we'll disagree with. Sorry. So let's do our best to understand where people are coming from. You need to look after yourself in the session, and if you're struggling, you're welcome to leave at any time, whether to log off or just take some time out. What we just ask is that you press the I need help now button if you're struggling, rather than writing something in the chat. And that just means that everyone else will kind of be able to continue the session up until the end. And we will contact you after the session to make sure you're okay. And then finally, I've mentioned this already, but you can share as much or as little as you want. I don't know if you know this, but sometimes when you're online and you talk about things, it can actually feel easier because you feel a little bit more anonymous. It feels a bit less hard to speak about what's been going on for you. But when you then kind of talk about things, it can actually leave you feeling quite vulnerable. So what we just ask is that you make sure you just keep an eye on how you're feeling and only share what feels comfortable. Can everyone just let me know if that's okay? Maybe just write in the chat to kind of check that if anyone has any questions, or let me know if that sounds all right. And then we'll kind of get into the nitty-gritty of the anxiety bits. Okay. Sounds like we're all on board. That's great. Okay, so I just realised when I was introducing, I should also say, I don't think I've actually run this anxiety session before, and usually it's Steph who tends to do the anxiety session. So what I noticed when I was preparing tonight is that actually I began to feel a little bit anxious about doing this session. And I think that probably some of my experience tonight I might share with you as we go along, because actually one of the things about feeling anxious is that you kind of need to stay with those anxious feelings in order to kind of conquer them. So I'm hoping that in a way tonight's going to be a bit of an experiment for me as well. Right, with that said, I'm going to do a quick poll and find out how anxious you guys are feeling. So what I want to ask you is, just on a scale of 1 to 10, if you could just rate your anxiety, with 1 being really low, you're not really anxious at all, and 10 being really high. So I just want to kind of find out how you're doing, really. Some people look like they might be changing their minds. Yeah, okay. Just waiting for one more person to answer on the poll. Okay, let me share these results with you and you can have a little look. Okay, so hopefully you can see now what I can see in front of me. And what you can see is that actually where we're at is we're quite kind of middle of the range. There's a couple of people up in the 7s, 6 or 7, which is quite high. One person feeling quite low in their anxiety right now. But it sounds like generally all of us have got some kind of feelings of anxiety going on. And what I would just say is that it's really normal when you begin to think about stress and you begin to think about anxiety. It's actually really normal to start feeling more stressed and anxious. And I appreciate that at some point in the session tonight that might happen for you, but what I'm going to ask you is to look after yourself, but also to try and stay with those feelings a little bit, and the reason why will become more obvious as we go along. Okay, so that is enough talking, I think, from me. What I want to ask you, a kind of quick question to get us started, which is, what do you think, is there a difference between stress, panic and anxiety? Let's have a think about what those words mean to you. I'm just going to turn the webcam off so we can have a bit of a chat. I just want to ask you guys, what do you think is the difference between stress, panic and anxiety? And there's no right or wrong answers to this. So that's, sorry, something, alarm's just gone out on outside. So what it seems like a bit of a kind of theme which is coming up is that stress feels kind of more, maybe more kind of general, or like panic is something that's more kind of specific, a kind of intense state, whereas stress seems to be kind of more kind of common or general. Everyone's exposed to stress at some point. Yeah, so stress is maybe kind of an umbrella term. I think like when we think about stress, I'll show you some definitions. So stress tends to be, so it's a feeling of being under too much mental or emotional or practical pressure. And people have different ways of reacting to stress. So a situation that feels stressful to one person may be actually really motivating to someone else. So, you know, some people kind of perform really well under pressure, whereas other people will find lots of pressure very daunting. And stress in itself is not an illness, but it can cause serious illness if it isn't addressed. So generally what we'd say is that to have, like, stress tends to be something that's a bit more short term, and that once the stress has passed, once what's causing stress has passed, generally your stress will alleviate or go away as well. Panic and anxiety are slightly different. So panic is about something physical going on for you. So it's a rush of intense psychological and physical symptoms, which can feel really frightening. I think someone said it's a very intense state, but it doesn't last forever. And panic often happens really suddenly. Often people say that they can't really find a reason for it, has no kind of, there's no kind of reason for you having a panic attack, for example. And that when that happens, they usually last between 5 and 20 minutes. And although it might feel as though you're in serious trouble, there aren't any dangers, there aren't any dangers, and it shouldn't cause any physical harm. So often what will happen if someone's having a panic attack is they'll feel like they're going to die. And actually, what's actually happening in your body, I'll go through this in more detail, but actually what's happening in your body is a normal physical response, and it won't cause you any long-term damage. And that can be hard to hold on to when you're in the middle of a panic attack, and we'll talk a bit more about that in the session. And the last one is anxiety. So anxiety is actually a really normal emotion, and it helps us to cope with difficult or challenging or even dangerous situations. So anxiety is actually really common, and I think someone said worry actually, so we talked a bit about worry. So there are times when we all feel worried, anxious or uptight. The problem with anxiety is when it starts to affect your functioning. And what that means is that when your anxiety becomes so persistent or happens so much that it starts to stop in the way of you doing your normal things that you would be doing in your day-to-day life. So what I want to talk about initially and quite quickly is just want to talk a bit about stress, because one of the things we're talking about today is exam stress. And I might just kind of do, if anyone wants to write in the chat whether they're doing some exams at the moment, I'd be interested just to kind of find out who is suffering with exam stress at the moment. So maybe you could just let us know in the chat. Because we're in the middle of exams, this is actually a really stressful time. And the news is that if you're stressed about exams, the chances are that once the exams are out the way, your stress is going to pass too. So stress is a short-term thing that will pass once the exams have gone. So what we're thinking about then is what can we help do to cope with the short-term stress that you're under. And there are two main ways that you can cope with stress. One, the first way to cope with stress is to look at what's causing the stress and try to address that. So if you were feeling, for example, if you were feeling really stressed about having way too much work to do, you might be thinking, okay, I want to take some things off my to-do list. Who else could do this and help me out? If you're doing exams, that's actually really hard because there's no one else that can do this exam for you. And actually, it's going to be very hard for you to change what's causing the stress, which means you need to really focus on the second way of coping with stress, which is thinking about how you can kind of manage the feelings that come up when you're beginning to feel really overwhelmed. So one of the things you might think about is like, what are some of the warning signs that you might be getting overwhelmed? Does anyone, what are some of the signs that you're struggling to cope? Some of them might be physical symptoms like not sleeping well, finding it hard to concentrate. You might begin to feel like your moods are going up and down and up and down. And you might start to have a lot of kind of racing thoughts going on, like I'm never going to get through this, it's too much. And I just want to pause and say I realise as we talk about this could be quite stressful to be talking about it right now. However, I'd be really interested to share as a group what are some things we can do to cope. So if you were going to share with each other, what's your top tip for coping with stress at the moment? I'm just going to turn the webcam off so we can chat a bit. So I think there's some really good points being raised, and I think what Shana's just said is really true, that actually managing stress in the same way that people respond differently to situations, the same is true of how you cope with stress. And actually it's really about finding something that works for you. So breathing exercises might be helpful for one person, taking like a break, making sure you have some positive things or some things that are important to you in your diary. All of those things are quite important for helping you to cope. So I think it's about trying to figure out what works for you is the most important thing. I also think it's important just to talk about because I think often it can look like everybody else is coping really well, and you can feel like you're the only one that's struggling. And I think that comes back to this idea of people responding differently to stress in different ways. And I think that sometimes the opposite can happen, which is that everybody starts to kind of get into a mass panic or a mass stress about what's going on. And so you just need to check in where your relationship is with that. If being in a group of people who are all very stressed isn't helpful for you, maybe you need to kind of distance yourself and do what you need to do to manage your stress in that situation. So I'm going to move on from stress. I realise it's a really kind of hot topic at the moment, but I do want to just talk a little bit about panic and anxiety as well. If I just show you this diagram which shows how they relate, what we tend to see is that if you have prolonged stress and panic, that usually that will lead to kind of anxiety. Anxiety is something that you might have from time to time, but if you're thinking about having kind of persistent anxiety, it will usually be caused by having kind of extended pressure and panic going on. So if I just come back to panic, when we're talking about panic, we're thinking about something that's a physical thing. So it's something that's going on in your body mostly. And if you kind of close your eyes, I'm going to be gentle with you here hopefully, but if you just kind of close your eyes and just take a second to kind of imagine that you're waking up in the morning and it's the day of one of your exams. I just want you to just notice what's happening in your body. Now, if you begin to feel panicky, breathe. So that's the first thing. Take a deep breath in. And what you might notice is some of these symptoms begin to happen. This is very small, so I'm going to talk through it. You begin to have something called the fight or flight response. Has anybody heard of that? If any of you are doing kind of biology or psychology, you might well know about this. But what you'll find is that what your body's doing is beginning to kind of get ready for a fight or to run away. So lots of physical things will start happening in your body so that you can either kind of freeze, or you can run away, or you can fight what the attack is. So your brain is responding to a dangerous situation. And what your body's going to do is it's going to create some chemicals called adrenaline, and that is going to set your body kind of on fire, basically. You'll start to have lots of racing thoughts. You might begin to start sweating. Your heart might start racing. You might find that you begin to have more shallow breathing. Your stomach will tense up because you don't need in order to kind of fight, you don't need your digestive system to be working. So your stomach will tense up, which might make you feel quite sick and nauseous. And then what will happen is that a lot of your muscles will become very tense. The idea of this fight or flight response is that it's a very natural way of helping you to cope with a threatening situation. And if you think kind of way back to kind of our ancestors, actually when we were kind of hunting and gathering, actually we needed this. So if you were kind of hunting in the woods and a bear came along, you needed this flight or fight system in order to survive. So what's happening for your body when you feel anxious or panicky is actually really normal. The problem is that your mind is telling you that the exam is like the bear in the woods. Does that make sense? I'm hoping that I'm being clear here. As I said, I've not talked through this before. I'm just checking my notes. So situations where you feel these panicky responses are actually about you perceiving the situation as dangerous. And the reality is that your body is responding in a way which is inappropriate or not realistic to the threat. And so there's something a bit kind of going on a bit wrong with your thinking. It's like there's some faulty thinking going on. So the situation itself is not the problem, it's how you are responding to it. And the problem is that because your body has this huge fight or flight system going on, it completely gets in the way of you being able to function normally. So, what can we do about it? Well, I think the first thing is that you need to not be scared of what's going on. Actually, I don't know if you can relate to this, but if you have a fight, if you begin to have panicky feelings, and then you notice your panicky feelings, often that can accelerate what's happening. So you begin to feel like, oh my God, I'm panicking, oh my God, I can't cope, and then you feel more and more panicky until you then kind of have a panic attack. So what it is about is trying not to be scared of the symptoms that are happening in your body and to try and think this is a really normal thing. And what happens is because these are horrible feelings, the sweaty palms, the not being able to breathe, the racing heart, because they're horrible feelings, what will happen is we'll tend to avoid what makes us feel like that. So if for example, being in a busy public place makes you feel panicky, you'll start avoiding going into public places because you don't want to have to feel these horrible feelings. And the problem with that is that it actually makes it harder for you to cope when you're in a public place. So the more you avoid it, the harder it will be each time you have to face that problem. And what that's a little bit about what I've been talking about tonight, which is that these feelings of being stressed and panicky and anxious are horrible. However, we've all got to kind of sit with them a little bit and stay with them, because the more we run away or avoid them, the worse they'll get. So even though it's really hard, it's actually really important. And I think that that's why I kind of feel like what we're doing tonight is doing something quite challenging. It's like a little experiment where we're practicing trying to stay with our stressed out feelings. I'm going to just give you a quick chance to ask any questions, because that's quite a lot of theory that I've just given you. If anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll respond as we're going along. And what I'm hoping you'll pick up on here is that panic, it has a huge impact on your body, but actually it's really what's going on in your mind that is the trouble. So what we need to do in order to understand panic is to think about what's going on psychologically for us. And I think this can be really hard, because when you're feeling all that fight or flight stuff, you don't really kind of feel very aware of what thoughts are going through your head. So what I thought we could do is watch a video. It's from an American kind of vlogger called Emily. I want to watch the video, and what I want you to do is to just think about what are some of the thoughts that are going through Emily's head at the moment. I'll just turn the webcam off whilst we watch that.
Basically, for me, my social anxiety stems around a fear of myself, really. It's a fear of myself seeming kind of, I don't know, like stupid, or like I don't even try, or cold and unfriendly, or rude. Yeah, stuff like that to other people. And it's kind of ironic because I'm so anxious, probably come off that way. And I'd probably come off cold and unfriendly because I'm so anxious, and I'm sitting there like, okay, this is with school, trying not to seem anxious and contain myself and keep my composure and like look like a normal human being that can function. And in this whole kind of whirlwind of, bodily responses, like fight or flight mode goes on, and in this whole like entire response, I guess you could call it, like anxiety response, I just can't like I like it's hard to explain. Like I don't show emotion, I don't talk, I don't move really, and if I do move, it's like really stiff, and it's hard to explain. Like I said, I'm doing my best to explain it, but it's kind of complicated. But yeah, so uh, it's pretty awkward. I've noticed that people kind of steer clear of people who are like, weird or like unfriendly. And like honestly, my biggest fear is coming off as unfriendly and like cold-hearted and just a cold person to be around and just not a pleasant person. Like that is my biggest fear, of coming across that way, because inside that's not how I feel. Inside I'm like, I want to talk to people, I want to like make friends, but like at the same time, something in my brain, there's this block, and something is just like, no, you can't do it, you're gonna fail, you're gonna do something so stupid, you're gonna regret everything you say, and you're gonna make a fool of yourself. And even if you don't make a fool of yourself, you're still gonna do something stupid. So don't even try, because it's all gonna come back to bite you. So that's basically what goes on in my head. And honestly, people have told me like, oh, get over yourself. Like, um, you know, it's not about you, and it's not about other people. It's about, we all share this earth and we all share this world, and it's not about you. It's about, you know, being a good person and stuff. And like, okay, I know that rationally, like in my head, I know that, but at the same time, I am just very stubborn, and I've always been stubborn, but I'm just well, okay, I don't know if it's me that's stubborn or if it's part of my brain that like doesn't work properly that's stubborn. I don't really know, but yeah. So it's very complicated, but yeah. So my biggest fear is that I come across a certain way, but because I'm so anxious, I probably do come across that way. So it's pretty ironic that I'm trying so hard not to come across a certain way, yet because I'm putting so much effort into not coming across that way, I end up coming across that way, which
Okay, so quite a lot of vision there. So what I'm hoping we can spend a bit of time now is thinking about how we can what can we spot about Emily's thinking that might be a bit of a problem? What are some of the things that she's thinking? What are her thoughts? And what is she doing about these thoughts? So I just want to give you guys a bit of a chance to chat that. And if there's anything else you noticed in the video, it's a chance to share that. Okay, so I think some really good points have been made about some of Emily's unhelpful thinking styles, as they would be called. So, we were talking about how maybe she gets a flood of negative thoughts, and you can see her spiraling, or she her thoughts start to run away with her. So she has one negative thought, and then lots flood in around her, feeling like she's a fool, feeling like I'm cold and unfriendly, I show no emotion. So she starts to have a lot of these thoughts and beliefs about herself. And those generate lots of feelings for her. So she feels awkward and anxious. She feels like it's a whirlwind of feelings. And because of the thoughts and the feelings that are happening for her around her social anxiety, she begins to avoid people. So she avoids cool people because that's a real trigger for her, makes her feel really anxious. And she says, I don't try, I give up, I just don't even try, because so she stops trying to interact with people. And the problem with that is a bit what I was saying earlier, is that because she stops trying, that maintains this cycle of her believing that she can't interact well with people. There's obviously a lot more going on there, but what I'm trying to explain or demonstrate to you is that when you feel anxious about something, usually there's probably quite a lot of thoughts that you're doing. I'm going to fail, I can't do this, whatever they might be, there might be quite a lot of anxious thoughts going on. And that because of those thoughts, you start feeling stressed, panicky, anxious, worthless. And because of them, you do something which is probably maintaining the anxiety. I know that these are quite difficult concepts to grab, but I'm hoping by seeing how Emily avoids people and how that makes her feel less able to cope in social situations, that might help you to begin to think about what is your own cycle of anxiety here. And there were some things that we've mentioned she could do to try and challenge some of these unhelpful thinking habits. So she can try and manage her anxiety as it comes up, so to manage the feelings. She can also try and work on her confidence. So maybe she needs to challenge some of these negative beliefs and try and interrupt them. And I think one thing I would say is that she needs to look at all the avoiding behaviours she's doing, so avoiding people, and she probably needs to try and challenge that more, because the more she avoids people, the more she's going to feel like she can't cope with people and that she's cold and what does she say? She's cold and unfriendly. And I think one thing, if you were if Emily was coming to therapy or counselling, one thing that you might be talking about with Emily is thinking about, okay, what's the truth here? What's the evidence that you're cold and unfriendly? So you might even get Emily to go out and do a poll with some people that she meets and ask them, am I a cold and unfriendly person? And probably she'll get feedback saying actually that she's not cold and unfriendly, and that a lot of this is her beliefs and that she needs to begin to try and challenge them. The other thing she could do is try and watch out for her unhelpful thinking styles. I've got a list of these here. I'm going to post a link. I think that this is a worksheet which has a list of unhelpful thinking styles, which might actually be quite useful for you to print off after the session and have a look at. And so she's doing quite a lot of these. She's disqualifying the positive. So she doesn't say anything positive about herself during the session. She kind of jumps to conclusions quite a lot. And she kind of filters out. Someone said that she filters out. As Harry said, he filters out anything positive. And so it's all kind of negative. She feels so negative about herself. She expects everyone else to feel negative too. So what I want you to do, not now, but later, is to take that handout away and think about what about your own thinking styles? Is there anything you need to be doing, maybe around these exams or any other causes of stress and anxiety that could help you cope better? And to help with that, I thought that a good place for us to kind of begin to end the session is to be thinking a little bit about how you can manage your own anxious thoughts. And I've got probably the last video for us to watch. There is a little handout that comes with this video, which looks like this. So this video is about conquering your fear, whatever it is that you're fearful of. So it's going to ask you to write down what you're afraid of, put your fear into context, what's the worst that can happen, rationalise, force yourself to physically relax, and then acclimate yourself to your fears. This will all make sense when we watch the video, so I'm going to put that on now.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Franklin Roosevelt said that on the day of his first inauguration. It was a pretty brave statement. He was becoming president in one of the worst years to ever become president. Smack dab in the middle of the Great Depression, he was staring down the barrel of a tanked economy. And he thought the only thing to be afraid of was fear? Actually, anyone who's suffered an intense phobia knows that the fear of something can easily be more crippling than the thing itself. This week, we took a viewer suggestion from Dylan, who wrote in about his fear of learning how to drive. Well, Dylan, today we're going to walk you through a 5-step method for conquering your fear. Are you ready? Fear isn't entirely a bad thing. In fact, it's a biological response that keeps us from climbing into lion pits at the zoo and doing other similarly stupid things. However, when you don't address your fears, they can mess with your confidence. They can keep you from accomplishing the things that you want to do, and even take a toll on your mental health. We're going to show you how to face those fears head on. Pause and print this Wellcast worksheet. Step 1. Put your fear under a microscope. Trying not to think about the thing you're scared of is about as easy as, ow, ignoring a nasty paper cut. You can do it until you accidentally get lemon juice in it. Instead of ignoring those thoughts, examine your fear completely. In your Wellcast journal, write down exactly what you're afraid of and how this fear makes you feel. What are the physical side effects of feeling this way? What are you missing out on because of this fear? For example, my fear of learning how to drive is making me sick to my stomach every time I get in the car. Ugh, my heart races. I'm too scared to do anything more than back out into the driveway. I'm never going to get my license. Step 2. Put your fear into context. Next, on your worksheet, answer the question, logically, what is the worst thing that could happen? Okay, well, if your fear is of driving, the worst thing that could happen is you could wreck your parents' car, take out a mailbox, hit the neighbor's cat. You could run over your dad's foot. Okay, look, the fact that you're even nervous about driving shows that you're taking this seriously. So good for you. You're on the right track. Now let's do something to tackle this fear. Step 3, rationalize. Okay, look at what you just wrote down. What are the odds of that actually happening? Well, not huge. The odds of dying in a car crash are roughly 1 in 11,000. You're statistically as likely to get injured by a toilet, or struck by lightning, or win an Oscar. In fact, you're twice as likely to die riding a bike as you are driving a car. Teenagers have been learning how to drive since the horse and buggy went out of style. Sure, accidents happen, but know that fear often comes from the right side of your brain. The emotional side. Force this fear over to the left side of your brain and take time to think logically about your situation. Step 4. Force yourself to physically relax. Stretch. Take long, deep breaths. Get your breathing steady and your blood pressure down. Try to release any tension you're carrying in your body. When you get scared, you often tense up, and this can cause chronic pain. Step 5. Acclimate yourself to the fear. It's cliche, but sometimes the best thing to do is face your fear and try to get used to it. Usually, the more often you do something, the less scary it gets. Make a decision to put yourself in the path of things that scare you. As long as these things aren't dangerous, of course. Alright, Wellcasters, to recap. Today we covered coping with our fears. Step 1. Put your fear under a microscope. Step 2. Put your fear into context. Step 3. Rationalize. Step 4. Force yourself to relax. And step 5. Acclimate yourself to your fear. Tweet us at WatchWell.
I'm just aware that it's 8 o'clock, and so I'm gonna run about 5 minutes over tonight. So I'm just hoping that that's okay. That hopefully you can just stay for a few extra minutes so we can finish the session together. What I want to just do before finish is kind of just recap on what the video is saying. So what you can see with this handout is what they're saying is that you need to first of all identify what it is that's causing your anxiety. What is your fear? Put it into context. So begin to think, what is the worst thing that can happen? Likely that's going to make you start feeling quite anxious. And then try and rationalize. So look at the facts. What's the evidence that this is going to happen? And how bad will it be if that happens? Will you be okay? Then try and force yourself to relax. Try to manage those feelings. And then basically it's about what they mean by acclimate yourself to your fears. Is actually then it's about trying to face those fears each time they come up rather than avoid them. I'm going to kind of summarise, and then I'm going to ask you all to kind of share your top tips for coping with anxiety. But what we've really done tonight is to think about how basically worrying about anxiety will actually make your anxiety worse. So whatever your current level of worry is, if you worry about it, that will make you feel worse. And the best thing you can do for your worry is to kind of face the problem of what's going on. Hopefully you'll feel that you've gained some knowledge and understanding from the session. We've done a little bit of talking about what is stress, what is panic, what is anxiety, how you can manage those feelings, and try and understand a little bit more about what's going on in your body when you feel stressed or anxious. Then there's kind of, I hope you'll take this away, the main message from this session is that you need to be confident. And although you might feel completely kind of disabled by your anxiety, you need to try and find a way with support and with the supportive techniques we've been discussing. You need to try and find a way to face your anxiety, because that's the only way that your anxiety is going to decrease. And then finally, it's about kind of trying to use some of these tips to help support yourself whilst you're going through that process. So I'm just going to give you a minute before we end just to kind of take time to say, is there something you think you can take away and try from this session? Or is there something you'd like to suggest for others? I need to carry on chatting as I'm just wrapping up. So there's a few kind of tips that people are sharing, and what feels really clear to me is that it's about really trying to get on top of your anxiety. And I guess one thing you've done is make a really big step by coming along to this session about anxiety, which is likely to make you feel anxious. And actually you've stayed through the session, and hopefully it feels like you all sound like you're kind of like, right, okay, I'm going to try and get on top of this. Which I know is easier said than done, but actually if you've got that kind of outlook, that's a really good first step towards kind of trying to manage this. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask Shana to post some links. One thing I haven't had time to do is do some relaxation exercises with you, but I've got a couple of links. You can find loads of this stuff on YouTube. There's lots of kind of videos that you can look that can really help in terms of the meditation that's been mentioned, breathing exercises. And then I think that the only thing that's left for me to say is just to do a bit of a kind of a thank you. So thanks everybody for coming. Thanks to Shana for facilitating. Thanks all for your patience, because I know that the camera's been a bit glitchy and I've had to look at my notes a few times. There are some other sessions coming up soon. So I think there's one coming up in a couple of weeks on mindfulness, which might be quite good during the exams. I think that one's in June. There's also one on kind of setting goals called Filming Your Future, which is next week. And then there's ones on loss and conflict coming up as well. So lots of kind of stuff you can get involved in. But we'll put something in the past Skycast section on our website after this session with some of the resources we've talked about. And in terms of useful links, I'd really recommend having a look at our website. There's quite a lot of information on there about anxiety, which might be really helpful. So yeah, have a little quick check out. And the only other thing is that at the end of the session, we're going to ask for your feedback on how you found it. I'd really appreciate it if you could give us some comments, because like I said, this is the first time I've done this session and we use some new videos tonight. So let us know how you found it and anything we can do to improve next time. Just can see you guys all saying thanks and goodbye, and good luck everybody with your exams and everything else that you've got coming up, and remember that you need to kind of conquer your fears, and I'm sure you'll go well. All right, bye everyone, bye.